Hey guys, Jeff here, and today I'm installing 12 by 24 porcelain tiles in my shower. I know tiling can be intimidating for some, but in this video we're going to share all my secrets to make this as easy as possible. And you can get the results that you're going to be proud of and impress your friends and family. And we're going to do it with basic tile tools so you don't have to invest a fortune. Let's just jump into this. When I go shopping for tile, I'm always considering the space I'm in. So I buy a tile that gives me the most potential for success and no slivers, which is 12 by 24 is becoming a real standard for bathrooms because most bathrooms have an 8-foot ceiling, which is 96 inches. It's 8 tiles is 96 inches. Kind of simple to lay out, isn't it? You know where the start at the bottom, you get to the top, it's a full tile. In this case, though, we have a 90-inch ceiling. That leaves me with a 6-inch at the ceiling. And I don't want that because that's a half tile and that looks ugly. So then I start thinking, well, maybe I'd be better off to start with a 6-inch at the bottom. So if I start with a 6-inch here, my first piece here is an incredibly difficult cut. To get it cut right, I've got all these different dimensions going on. 6 is just really tricky. It ends up with the full tile at the top, but I have another option, and that is to start with a ledger board. Okay. Now, if I put my ledger board here and I put a level on it and I screw it to the wall, I'm going to have to come back after I take it off and fill those holes, but I have the Curdy fix for that, so it makes it really simple, right? If I just go with a ledger board, I'm going to be ending up probably closer to 7 inches off the bottom. So instead of a full tile at the top, I'll have an 11-inch tile. Now, 11 versus 12 works for me because 11 inches looks like a full tile. Make sense? And that makes my start really simple. And I can just stick this on, throw in a screw, and off I go to the races. Now when I see that line on both pieces of wood, I know I'm level. Bam. So all I'm going to do is drive this board into the framing and follow this laser line around the room to set all of my wood up. Now we're ready to build. All of this before the thin set dries out too much. We're going to get the first few tiles on. Now, the only thing left to discuss is our pattern. And that's simple. These tiles are just a little less than 12. We're going to be using wedges for spacers and a tile leveling clip system. This is ceramic, of course, and this is basically where we want to come out to. Now our tile is 24 inches long, give or take a hair, right? And I love the 1/3 technique. And here's why. If I can put my tile on with 1/3, so that makes it basically 8 inches from the back wall, then I end up with a tile that comes out about 32 inches, all right? And that is going to be about 2¼ inches past the edge of my head. Now, since we're tiling the back wall first, I actually get an extra ½ inch. So 8 here, full tile, and then we reverse. Full tile, 8 here, okay? And that's how we do this wall. Nice and simple, okay? It goes together really quick and easy. 24 inches across the back gives me 48, and then a sliver. Okay, I'm going to try to avoid the slivers by doing something a little bit different. I would rather have excess waste than a sliver. Okay, so what I'm going to do here, that's my center line. And I'm using a dry erase marker, which cleans off of matte tile just fine. That's my center line. So I'm going to measure my wall. And you have two choices. You measure from the corner or you measure off center. I'm 52.5, we're going to call it. So that's 26 1/4. Okay. So I'm going to put my center line on here, 26 1/4. You'll see it as we build it. That's usually just the best way to go. If you want to map it all out, you can do some 3D rendering. You can pull out, your graph paper and have some fun. But I know on an odd-shaped wall, starting in the center works, starting in the edge of the wall never does. And so that's fine. So here we go. We're using a 1/4 inch by 3/8 trowel. We're going to be putting on our thin set vertical. Okay. This will allow for any trapped water that might eventually one day work its way in behind the tile. to travel north and south freely and find its way to the drain eventually. Okay? Here we go. Now, we're going to comb it out consistently. We're going to want to put thin set everywhere, even though we're starting in the middle. Get it on the wall. Do enough to get your first 2 or 3 tiles and cuts in. If you try to put the thin set on the wall as you go, you're going to find it incredibly frustrating. Now we're at that point in the day where it is lunchtime. But when you're working with tile, there's no such thing as lunchtime. We only tell time by when the pail of thin set is finished. That's it. So until that pail is finished, it is tile time. End of discussion. This is a trailer home. This outside wall was not wet shimmed because I had to meet at the top. So definitely going to be doing the backbutter technique. Okay, that'll help us get a better bond. Set it on the ledge. Line these two up. Collapse that ridge. Okay? That is the entire process right there. That is one tile. Now we're going to do the rest. Now because we're doing 8-inch offset, you're always going to have a tile in the first 8 inches. Okay? So make sure you leave them over far enough. Get a wedge in behind the sides as well. All right? Now all we got to do is take measurements and then score as we go along. By the way, for the purpose of this job today, hey, I picked up a handy scratch tool. This should come all pre-assembled and ready to roll. Yeah. And the way a scratch tool works is simple. There's always a little arrow on the front here, and it tells you where the cut is going to be. You just measure off to the distance that you want. You set up the tile where you want it. Is the cutting wheel engaged? Yep. There should be a little round brass wheel here. This little wheel. It does all the work for you. So you push this down to the wheels there. You'll hear it grinding scratch. Okay? One pass. You lift the tool, you set the pedal, and you give it a little bit of pressure. You get a perfect cut. Every single time. Now, because we're using backbutter technique on one tile, you have to use every tile now. Or you're going to have different thicknesses on the wall with your tiles. Okay? Probably could have cut myself just a little bit of slack there, eh? Now, there we go. Always put the cut tile into the inside corner. All right. Wait. And these little wedges are actually designed to create compression, keeps the surface of the tiles at the same height in the wall. Okay. So I'm going to have that one. Probably need a second one over here for that edge. That's all right. So the goal here is to finish tiling the entire back wall before we go to the sides. All right? And I already see this happening. What's going to happen here is all these offcuts are going to end up being used on the shorter shower walls. Oh, I can always so messy this project. All right, because we're going to go full tile with an 8-inch piece. And it should be pretty much perfect. Yeah, 9 1/4. All right, so I'll be able to cut this down and use it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start stacking these over here. I'm getting 2 cuts basically per row. And all of my cuts are going to be just sitting there waiting for me when I get there. That'll be awesome. Now, we got enough thin set in here. Do a couple more rows. We'll show a couple more tricks here. There we go. Again, tiling wall to wall, all in one pass. All right. Now, we'll do the full tile first. Right here. There's my line. That is where the corner of my tile is going to go. I actually got this measurement off. There we go. And wham. There we go. This is going to eliminate the lippage. And if you don't have strong hands, you can go out and buy the pinch tool. There's a special tool that claws it and you can ratchet it together. I find that when I'm consistent on a smooth surface like this, it's not necessary. Now, the next row goes in the same position as this one. So I know I need a tile clip there, and we'll put one in the middle, and we'll put one here as well. 22 and a half is a little tight. 22 3/8. This goes a lot faster than you think it will. Having a scratch tool here means I don't have to get up and down and go use any other cutting tools. 22 3/8. This is the versatility of this tool. Okay. Let's line up 22 3/8, which is pretty much a full tile, which is why we're using this system. Now, my job here is to hold the weight of the tile so I can scratch it. Even works on little tiny pieces, okay. Gotta love it. Now, here's my cut end, goes against the wall. Okay. If you get squeeze out between the tile, clean it out right away. Okay, don't wait, or it'll cause you a whole world of hurt. Now you're gonna see something in this other corner I should show you. I measured from the bottom. You see this wall here is falling away. One of the reasons why the working on the center works, because you're always going to have a cut. The older the house, the more inconsistent the walls. Now you can start off with laser levels in the corners. You can wet shim all the corners if you want to. You can rebuild. You can laminate new studs. There's all kinds of things you can do to avoid these problems. But starting with a center line on the middle of your tile generally gives you offcuts everywhere you go. So my next tile is going to be a little bit longer, like this row here. And that's fine because I've got the room in that tile. Now, let's cut this one. Hopefully that made a little bit of sense. We're going to see how straight this one is. 6.5. 6.5. Okay. Remember, this wall was wet shimmed, so it's much more consistent. Now, I'm going to take one of my offcuts here and use it up. In the world did I mess that up? Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. Get in front of the tape to read it, dummy. That one's not going to be any to anybody. There's a lesson for you. Always, always read a tape straight on. If you read it from this side, you're always going to get the measurement wrong. That tile should actually cut it 6 1/4. I gave myself no mercy. It took me to school. Here we go. And we got just enough thin set in here to do one more row. And then we'll take lunch. It'll be lunchtime when this pail is empty. We're going to go right on that grout line. We're going to slide it over till the light disappears off the tile. Okay. And then you see how the light's in the middle of it? Right now it's on the tile. I'm going to collapse the ridges, pulling the left just a touch. Okay, that's how we make sure we keep things consistent as we go along. Now we're going to measure the middle to the clip, 14.5. Double check here and here, make sure things aren't moving around too much. There's a little bit of a difference. I'm going to cut at 14 1/4 and allow this tile to cover the gap. 14 3/8. Now we've got to think about this, because we're going to measure this corner is up here. So I want to measure this out at 14.5. Okay, so now I'm square at 14.5. But I don't want 14.5 in the bottom, I want 14 3/8. So I'm going to do is I'm going to just hold this right here like this, and I'm going to rotate my tile and open up the wedge. So now I'm at 14.5 here, 14 3/8. All right. Yes. Perfect. Now 1/8 of an inch doesn't make a big difference unless you're working for somebody else. Remember, if you're working for yourself and you have a bit of a gap, it doesn't matter. You're going to be coming back with silicone anyway. You have to silicone the difference in plane. Okay? That's the rule for tile. But if you're working for a client, they always come and check out your work at the end of the day after you've left, and they get very nervous when they see odd gaps. So they don't understand the process as much. If you're working for other people, consider closing these gaps and making it look as perfect as possible. Besides, even if you're DIYing it and you want your family to come look at your work, you don't want them to walk in and go, ooh, what's with all the nasty gaps, Daddy? Right? I'm almost out of cement. Even if I tried, I can't do another row. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the clips. For now, I am going to clean this up, get myself a well-deserved break, fuel my body. I'll come back and do this again in a minute. Always keep your job site clean, guys. You'd be surprised how fast this stuff can set up. Life is unpredictable. When you think you got 20 minutes or half an hour for lunch, and the phone rings, and then one of your kids falls off your bike, and next thing you know, you're on the way to the hospital, and you come back 3 hours later and all your clips are embedded in thin set and it's dried on the wall, and now you got to chisel it all off, and now you've compromised your waterproofing. Just save yourself all that hassle. You're here. You're going to need this clip. Even if the thin set dries, and just check to see where they are 2 rows down, because that's what you're supporting, okay? Now, if life happens to you and you aren't able to get back on this project for the rest of the day, at least you're in a situation where that can dry, no problem. And you can pick this up tomorrow, the day after, or next week. It doesn't matter. Okay? Never leave a job site unless it's in a situation where something happens, you can't get back till tomorrow. You're not causing any damage. Cheers. Oh, that's experience talking right there. Oh yeah, I almost forgot. Before you walk away, clean your tools. Always have a pail of water and a sponge handy. Every time you leave the job site, clean your tools for the exact same reason. Because, you know, it's only 25 or 30 bucks. But you can't clean this again after the fact. So that's 30 bucks. 30 bucks that's a bloody pizza. All right, guys. Well, it's after lunch, and I got a fresh batch of thin set made, but we got 10 minutes before we can tile. So we're going to take a couple minutes and do some more preparation. We have edging for the edge of our tile. It's a Schluter, it's plastic, and my ceiling height is 90 inches for both sides. So I'm going to go and cut those on my chop saw real quick. Let's get a nice clean laser edge. You're going to find if you try to use snips on the metal or the plastic, it always comes a little imperfect. So it's best to go get your chop saw and get a nice clean edge so that you don't have an ugly corner sticking out screaming, hey, I cheaped out on using a pair of scissors. All right, let's go cut some trim. Generally speaking, plastic trims are relatively safe. The secret is to have compression on the material so it's not flopping around. Otherwise, I can grab a saw blade and just go firing off. There we go. That's a perfect edge. Let's get another one over for the other side. Exactly 8 inches. The only thing you have to remember when you're tiling is that these inside corner joints, okay? It's what we call in our business a change of plane. This is one plane, this is another plane. And in this area here, we have to finish with a silicone bead. And it's going to be convex. It'll bond both materials together. And that isn't because of expansion contraction in homes. Houses have a tendency to be drier or wetter at different times of the year, and so walls do move. If you rely on your grout only, it'll crack. So by having a silicone joint here, we avoid all the problems that go along with it. That also means that you have a little bit of mercy there if you have some gap. Because if you want to go with a nice wide silicone bead, you can cover 1/4 inch all the way down to almost 0. So don't be too hard on yourself while you're tiling, knowing you've got that flexibility to just use a thicker corner bead. Silicone can be a man's best friend when you're working. All right. Here we go. We got a couple of those started. Try to work clean here if we can. The secret here is to lay it on nice and gentle. Don't press it in and collapse the ridges yet. So we want to get this in here still, right? Okay. Now, we're going to take a second with our laser level. We're going to drop a line right on the edge of the plastic, right here, down by the tile. And I'm intentionally leaving just a small little grout line there. I'm going to set this on the line, and then a little bit of thin set in those holes to create a bond and establish my edge exactly where I want it. Right up to the ceiling. There we go. Now we can work off that plastic and not have to use a laser line. Now we've already checked our line in this corner, and it is pretty consistently straight. Really happy with that. Now we're going to measure from inside the plastic to this side of our spacer, 7 7/8. Now I want to leave a little bit of a gap here as well. Yeah, so we should go 7 3/4. 7 3/4. Let me get that right on that edge. There we are. Now, our cut edge goes on the outside. Okay, so we're just going to eyeball that. Make sure we're going to be happy. Okay, you can see how quickly this can come together. Now I know as a DIYer, guys, you got options, right? I mean, you don't always have to tile. There is an option out there. They sell a wallboard shower system that looks like finished tile, and you basically you slap these things in place and then you silicone the joints, panel to panel. The difference is there's no waterproofing system behind them. You're really relying on that silicone joint for everything. And here we're just relying on a silicone joint so that we don't have an ugly gap if it cracks. Our waterproofing system is completely separate of the integrity of that silicone joint. I'm not a big fan of spending almost $1,000 on a wall panel system and then trusting a $10 tube of silicone to make sure that it lasts. Oh, wait a minute. I'm 3 tiles high here already. I've got way too much thin set. I'm gonna do another row on the back wall. Yeah, we're gonna go to 4 rows high. We gotta use the thin setup. I hate wasting that stuff. So I'm gonna just get busy with doing that right away. Let's do 1 more row back here. Let's get that thrown up there. 6 1/4. That is the benefit of working with ceramic versus porcelain, guys. Scratch tool, right where you're working. Porcelain, you need a wet saw. It does not cut as nice. A lot of porcelain is just way too hard for these scratch tools. It takes a long time to really develop good skill and good habit with them. Here we are. Yeah. We're gonna not go any higher. So I'm gonna just clean this up before I lose my track of my plan here. These other clips in. Just following the pattern here. Know where the load transfer is. Here we go. Now that we got a rhythm, we got things square, we're just flying. Now we're gonna redirect our attention over to this side. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the actual measurement and I'm removing 1/8 to create a gap at the wall. Okay? So my actual is 8 1/8, and so I'm going to cut it at actually 8. Okay. Whew. You know what? We have enough. We're done with this now. Served its purpose. Okay, So far, so good. Oh, no way. That was stripped already? Great. All right, so I got a 3-inch screw, 3/4. We got a way to go with this one. Problem meets solution. Here we go. Where are my pliers? There's only really one way to do this. Using the hammer as a claw, it doesn't work when you got this much of a thread in the wall. All you can hope to do now is use the side cutters. It's the teeth here. Get the hold of that screw and just do this until you back it up enough that you can pull it out. This takes a minute, but it works. Oh, for Pete's sake. You know what? This was really wedged in. If I remember that correctly, it was kind of too perfect of a fit. Let's do this. Patience is always the key in these scenarios. One thing we don't want to do is get violent, and then it'll wreck your tile. Because if you break your tile, then you've got to take it off that fleece. And by doing that, you pretty much destroy your waterproofing, so you got to start the whole process all over again. Recommendation, now that you've seen that, when you use these ledger boards, when you're done tiling at the end of the day, remember the first row, that's already set. It's going to carry the weight without this overnight. Before you leave, unscrew them. That was way too much work. That leaves us with the issue of waterproofing, because now we have affected negatively our seal. And this is where this Cardifix comes to the rescue, okay? So every one of these holes where I had a screw is now a penetration of my membrane system, so I've got to seal it up. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put the cut end over the hole, inject it into the hole, lift it off, and then flatten it out. So I can be confident that I got a good seal. So here we go. Now, remember, this is the one screw hole that I made that I missed, and the one where I grabbed it. So they're both just as dangerous if left unattended. I'm going to get pressure on there, and then we're going to lift it off. Little dab will do. Okay. So if you haven't seen this before, we're just going to remove these now using my tape measure. This is all rubber. Okay? So even if I mark it, that's just the rubber coming off. And I want to take these out and save these yellow wedges. All right? The more embedded they are in thin set, the harder it is to knock them out, all right? The other way is grab a rubber mallet. This seems to work just fine. All right, there we go. Now we'll clean up. And before we make our thin set, we're actually going to measure off and cut the first tile. This is going to be in a full tile here. Here's my grout line. So we got to measure and cut that perfectly. So that'll be the first order of business today. Once I rescue all my wedges, which I'm going to need for the rest of my wall and for my floor, clean little pickup sticks here. Whoa, throwback to that game. How many people remember pickup sticks? All right, now I'm going to recommend whenever you get a chance, always clean your tile the next day. This is actually, for me, we tiled on Friday, and I'm back here on Monday. Now, the reason I don't like waiting this long is even though the thin set will come off, generally you gotta make it wet, let it soak for a little bit, and then you can get to it, but it's a lot more work. Usually involves a little bit of elbow grease. First thing we do is get everything wet, and then we go back to the beginning. If your project is taking you multiple days, and you let that thin set sit for too long, it will cure in place. And then you are in for one hell of a workout. If you need to use a tool to scrape it off, try not to go into the sides of the tile. Just on the face of it, it'll be one thing. Avoid doing this, because it's really not that difficult to twist. What you end up doing is chipping the glaze off of the tile. So this piece of cement right here has to come out. And the only way to do that is to get it wet, and then get it wet, and then get it wet again, and just keep on working that until it all gets cleaned up. But we have to have all of the thin set removed so that we can fill those spaces with grout. There is a triangle tip carbide grout remover tool, and you can set that in your line and you can pull it. I don't have one here today, so against my better judgment and advice, I'm going to use my experience and break my rules. Do what I say, not what I do, guys. Oh my goodness. See how easy that all wipes off once it's been sitting wet for a while? All right, let's get some tile in here. Alrighty, here we go. Now, we're gonna do this again. We're gonna throw our line on here, right in our grout line. That way I can draw my grout line on and have a point of reference for my measurement. I'm gonna double check. 23 3/4. I believe that's perfect. Yes. This tile is full right into here, so we can actually measure from this point coming out and then from our tab coming up. All right, so here's my tile and here's my measurement. 9.5, 14 1/4 from my spacer. I'm looking for this line right here, and that one is 8 3/4. Here's a great sheet for you. This will help you a lot with your measuring. Here is my finished faceplate for my shower. And here's the back side. It has a little rubber gasket, a little foam gasket, sorry, not rubber, but it's like a 32nd of an inch thicker than the plastic. So right here we got a notch in the faceplate. And you'll notice the gasket doesn't come around. And there's another gasket here. And here's how this works. So in theory, this little gasket here is the same shape as this piece of metal here. Okay? And so that seals that off. Okay? And then this gasket here would in theory go on the tile. Now, if it's here on the tile and the grout is concave, then you'd have to add silicone to seal that up. And this is why we don't like to use silicone on these faceplates. A, they're plastic and they look like junk, okay? B, it's designed to let the water out. So what we do is a combination of this gasket here and then this. That gives us our waterproofing. So if any water gets in behind, it comes down the wall, makes contact with this, runs around, and either goes down the wall or has an exit hole on the flange. So this is why all this goes together. And I pulled this out for this reason. Now I'm gonna draw this. That's where my flange is, okay? And this is where my foam is, that area there. So I can actually draw my line inside, just helping you to visualize what the job is here. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to cut a round hole, and you'll notice that my placement of this thing is a little off center, it's not perfect, but I have plenty of room. So if I cut my hole here in my tile, then I'm going to be over top of this, I'll have room, and then the gasket can make contact with the tile. Now in this case, we intentionally did this layout so this would be cut into a full tile, there's no grout line. If you're using smaller tile, you're going to have plenty of grout lines. Always try to make sure that this is going to be the cut you want, okay? Resist the temptation to let this cover big chunks of stone, okay? You want to make this perfect every time. So, we have locations to this point, this point, this point, and this point with these measurements. We're going to put that on our tile, and then we're going to trace that out, okay? And then we are going to be just fine. And we're going to grab the grinder, and I'll show you how to cut this circle. That's my actual center. So I'm going to just kind of like do like a protractor with my hand. That gets pretty close to a perfect circle. All right, now we're going to go outside and grab the grinder and our glasses, and we'll cut this bad boy. Okay, and here we go. Here's my grinder. No guard, no blade, no protection. All right, that's so you can see what you're doing, right? And so then I have the flexibility to cut like this, and that's how you get a circle like this. All right. Here we go. So what I'm showing you is the limitation about how deep you can get when your blade is still up in the air. Because now, instead of cutting it from the tip, I'm cutting using almost 2 inches of blade, right? And so as I'm going along here, if I keep in that position and I keep going deeper, I also make the circle wider. We don't want that. So what we do is we use the side of the blade. You'll notice that the back side and the front side all have this little webbing. These are all diamond chunks, and they all cut. It's not just the short, skinny surface here. Now you get the idea, right? Here's a little pro tip for you. Now that we have a much wider area to work with, I can plunge cut through in 4 or 6 locations. I can finish the cut from the back side using the circle so that my face stays intact. Now it's just a matter of trying to make this a little bit prettier, because I do want to have this junk out of the way because we measured rather precisely, right? So we do that. There we go. There are other ways and other tools, but this is a $30 blade on a $30 grinder. Using a combination of cutting from the front and the back, you will get a great result. Remember, it's not about how sexy it is now, it's about how sexy it is when the faceplate is on. So now we're gonna go and check to see how this works. Okay, here we go. And we'll set it on the plastics. Roll it into position. We'll put the plate on. And this is just to confirm, because that circle isn't in a perfect location, right? That's where our flange, our gasket's going to be. That is amazing. And in my world, it's what I call perfect every time. Okay, now we got the hard cut done. And we go, always set it on the back edge of the tile, not on the glaze edge, okay? I'm ready to go mix thin set now, because now it's just a matter of installation. So, oh yeah, before we can finish this wall, we have to address this area here. I didn't clean that up very well. We should dry fit these 3 tiles as well before we make our thin set. There's a lot of work doing detail cuts around here, right? So if the more dry fitting and cutting we do before we mix, the better off we're gonna be. I'm gonna show you what we're gonna do here. I've got my PVC trim. This is the edging that we're using against the walls. We're gonna use it around the whole perimeter of this as well. That way I've got something where I can paint this wood and I can get a silicone seal between the PVC and the wood. And that'll be great. Now, my first joint, 37 and what the heck, 3/8. Okay. Make sure I'm not doing this backwards. Here we go, 37 and 3/8. You hold this underneath your tape where the 3/8 part is. Boom. And then you cut it all the way to the edge. Okay? And basically, we're going to let the PVC bend. We're going to go further than we want to and then come back. Now, when I install that, all I have to do now is visualize where my edge is. Yeah, that looks good. There's my outside corner. And I guess we'll use the measurement, 37 and 3/8. There we go. Okay. That's my spot. Now we got our trim. Yeah, that's pretty damn close to perfect. right? And we're going to be adding 1/4 inch all the way around. I just like to be able to visualize things. If I can see it, then I know what I'm doing. So when I'm measuring my tile, I want to have at least a 1/4 inch away so that I have room for that edging and a grout line. Okay, that means that this tile is going to go here. And all we do is this. Measure off a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 down. And that's my cutout. Not bad, eh? Let's see if we're in here somewhat square. Yeah, that is good. Okay. Oy, oy. I'm looking at this grout line. I never really considered that with the window as part of my... That is ridiculous. Now, I can't even remember back to Friday if I'd even thought that out. But that is just too much fun. The next tile finishes right here. And then I put my sliver in. Okay, so that means this tile is getting cut that dimension right there, the whole tile. Nice and simple. I don't know how I got that lucky. Maybe I was smart. Okay, we'll get these two cut. Then we'll make our thin set. At least that way, there's a good chance we'll be able to finish the whole batch without any interruption. And for that, we need to go to, well, the wet saw. Because my scratch tool isn't long enough to put a 24-inch tile on it. Let's get wet. There we go. Okay, well, our thin set is ready. This is good. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually trowel the tile, okay? And I'm going to leave it a little heavy on purpose because I don't like to have to fuss around putting thin set in silly little spaces like that. It just makes a hell of a mess. This is the perfect opportunity for me to show you this. This is Schluter shelf, stainless steel, designed for installation with these tabs in your grout space. So it's actually thin. It's a 1/8 tab. So you can work with any one of your tile jobs. You just stick it in the grout line, and off you go to the races. There you go, shampoo shelf. That'll just get grouted in when we're ready to do the rest of the work. Nice and easy. All right, well, let's get our line here, just under 8. Okay. Just showing a little bit of versatility here when you're dealing with these odd spaces, all right? You can always do the tile first if you just lay it on a little thicker. Go. All right. Oh, shoot. Made a mistake. All right, let's deal with the elephant in the room. Our laser line for my grout is here. Remember, we're not starting from that edge. We started off the middle. So that means this tile is cut the wrong size. All right. And it is now garbage. Fantastic. And this one is fine, but needs to move over to that grout line that we had established. Alrighty. I gotta cut a brand new tile. That is just lovely. First thing is first. We can cut this one in. That is one of the challenges with this kind of work. You have a couple days off, you lose your rhythm. There we go. Back to the drawing board, eh? First thing we need to do is get this cut the right size. Back to the saw. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Woo, gonna be one of those days, is it? All right. Okay. So when your wall isn't perfect, your tie still has to be. Nice to have, you have to have that gap, okay? Remember, I'm doing all of this because I didn't want to have to uninstall and reinstall the window and the new wall board, and I'm not familiar with this technology. The handle goes to a crank outside. It's just, yeah. Sometimes it's just better to leave it and forget it and move on and treat it like more of a remodel and not a full renovation, right? Off we go to the saw. All right, now, nothing moves very fast with all these cuts, see? Remember, the first half of this project was so simple. Just slap and go. Now, these pipes are 1.25 inches. Okay, what we want to do is we want to cut a 1.5 inch square, because the flange, the cap that comes on here, is easy like a 2 inch on this, okay? It's good to know. We're gonna cut it a little tight, somewhere between 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. But the way we do this is we just put the spacer here, go up to it, get our measurement, and that's gonna be 2 inches, all right? And then we add the 1.25 inches, and then that's 3.25 inches, obviously. And then we're gonna measure from here over, okay? So the difference between here and the plastic is 1/8. So let's just go like this. We'll take that 1/8 off. We're gonna go 19 and then 20.5. We'll go 19, 20.5. And like I said, because we're gonna be cutting from the front and the back side, we can keep that nice and tight. And instead of using a hole saw, I'm just gonna use the grinder, cut it square. 19, and I'm going to mark on the inside of 19 and a hair, 20.5 shy, so this doesn't get away from us. And then 2 and then 3.25. The dry erase works better when it's dry. Here we go. Here we are. So I'm going to go punch that through with the grinder. Let's go see that technique actually, because it's pretty simple and anybody can use it. And it's a lot faster and a lot safer than those hole saw bits that don't have a pilot hole drill bit, right? Because they like tend to run around on you. All right, here's my system for cutting from the back side. What I do is I hold the grinder while I can see this notch, okay? And I'm gonna line them up, and I'm just gonna put a quick score in the back, all 4 lines, and then I'll cut through. All right, so I'll make a really long run just to get the location, and I do the same thing with here. Now I got it traced out, I can just cut it through. So one thing I want to do here when I'm doing this is I want to keep the arbor in the middle of those 2 lines, so that I'm cutting the same depth on both pieces, okay? Now, we can see through that now. So what we don't want to do is cut any more on this surface, because it would actually extend the cut lines too far. So what I want to do is, now that I can see that, I'm going to drop my arbor in the middle, and I'm going to plunge it just until the daylight connects with the other side, okay? And that really minimizes the effect of cutting through. Okay, now we're good to go. Should be plenty of mercy there for us to be able to install. And away we go. Alrighty, 1.5. So just drop the laser line right up my grout line. I want to translate that up here. And so much easier to do if you're left-handed. There we go. So that's what we're measuring from and to, okay? Now, to the ceiling, I'm thinking if I go with 3.5-inch tile, that was going to work with a bit of a gap, 3 5/8 maybe? Yeah. It's not as consistent as the sides, oddly enough. 3.5 large, and I gotta get rid of this trim that's up here too. Ah, yeah. We also want to get this tile here. Okay. So we're going to take whatever our measurement is. We're going to add at least another quarter. Okay, so we're going to go 14 3/4, 11 1/8 again, and then this one is 11 1/8 again. All right, so I need 2.5 pieces at 11 1/8. 11 1/8. I need to have basically full tile strip, and then a piece that size for there, and a piece this size for over there. So I'm just going to get that marked out right now. 3.5, 11 1/8. Let's get our first round of cuts done, and then we will come back. Now in this scenario, I have to actually install that piece and that piece first. Gotta get it in behind the tile, right? I'm gonna get this over to my black line, which represents my grout line. Draw another grout line here. There we go. Now I've got a reference. First we scratch, and then we can lift them up for a dry fit and get that inside corner cut figured out. I'm just not liking that. Was I way too aggressive with that measurement? Oh yeah, oh yeah. That shouldn't even be 14.5. We'll salvage that to the other side. I gotta shave a little bit off here. That's more like it. All right. Okay, I'm just gonna do the marks. I'm actually gonna take my square and I'm gonna trace that right out. One step at a time here. Okay. 2 pieces of almost nothing take a lot of time. You know, it's all about the details, folks. Okay. Whew. Yeah, that's done. All right. Yeah, that's a shower. Heck yeah. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean up a little bit, reset myself, and we'll work on putting down the shower floor. That way, tomorrow when we're working in here, I can do the rest of those trims on top of the tile, continue that water diversion system. Remember, water, over. When you're waterproof like this, it doesn't really matter, but you'll get a better cut with a long piece of stone sitting on small mosaic than you will cutting all your mosaic up against the stone. Because we'll get a better look, and because it helps with water diversion, we're just going to call that good practice, okay? Doing the shower floor today. This is called Ready Tile, okay? It's a monolithic one piece that doesn't need to be waterproofed shower pan that's designed to be tiled as a finish. And it really, all we do is just tile right over top of this thing. It's amazing. If you haven't been watching the series, start from the very beginning. We're teaching you how to install your Luter Curdy board. We're wet shimming it on the wall. We're doing a lot of advanced techniques. We're waterproofing, we're tiling. Today we're doing this. This is kind of fun. Starting out with mapping it out, okay? This is always the interesting part of this kind of a project. Everything I'm using in this entire project is purchased at Home Depot. All the links are going to be in the video description for you. Make your life easy, okay? What I'm doing is I'm mapping this out. And I'm getting an idea of what's going to happen when I get where I'm going. There's 2 ways to do it. In the shower. Okay, or you can just take the product out of the shower, lay it on the floor. All right. This is how we map it out. I'm going to take my actual measurement, and I'm coming up at 24.5 is the number we're going to work with. So if I measure from the full tile 24.5, about here. All right. Now this could be a cut, right? But if we look at the beginning, I have all these triangles. I'm going to have to salvage triangles, cut the triangles in half and fit them in. So instead, I'm thinking if we do a cut line right here and then measure our 24.5, we're right here, just off the tip. So then I can cut both sides and I don't have to set all these little silly gray things along the edge. And that allows the tile that goes on the side to actually cap it all. And so that makes my life really simple. So in that spirit, I would cut this back edge off here as well. Okay, so we'll trim our sheets. Okay, so look how easy that is to work with. That's just wonderful. Okay, so now we know what we're gonna do to get started here. What about when we get down there? Right? What happens around that drain? And should we be starting at the drain? And that's the million-dollar question. And this is why whenever you're doing a tile job like this, you want to take some time to do a dry fit. Actual conditions may be different than what's listed on product. Little minutia details. Well, I like that because then I'm going to be cutting the tile basically right here for the drain. So what I'm looking at is this edge here, probably cutting around that point. Okay, now here is my drain, actually. It is stainless steel, and it is sitting a little bit higher than this. So I need to make sure that I have room for this to finish in front of that drain. So I'd probably cut something a little heavier right there. Leave just a small gap. Well, that's not a big deal at all, is it? Love dry erase markers. Okay, last couple rows. How perfect is that going to work out? It cuts right down the middle of that tile. Oh, isn't that something? Now over on this side, my diamonds are all cut right down the middle. But I think for the simplicity of starting at the other end, that is going to work just fine. The other option is I find a way to start right here in the middle. And that is the other option that I've got to actually consider, because that would be the sexiest look at the drain. Okay, now we have a plan. I'm doing this. Whenever you're doing a job and it's about design and detail, you always want to consider what's the most obvious, right? Or what's grabbing the most attention. This stainless steel grate is going to draw all the attention. And so having these sexy little diamonds perfectly balanced on each side, it's like a mirror image of each other, is going to be worth the effort. Okay, so we're starting here. I'm going to cut these sides off on the wet saw and then take every one of those little pieces and manually insert them. Okay, that's all there is to it. Really quite simple. And the first thing I want to do now, get that diamond tip in the middle of that grate. Get a straight edge in here. I want to trace out my cut line from here to here. I'm going to cut these couple pieces of tile out so we can customize them and set them in place. Let's go to the wet saw and get this prepped up. Here we go. Now, let's look how sexy this is. This was a good choice. No doubt about it. You can see these sheets are put together in little dabs of adhesive. Okay, so actually the sheets all get thrown on a conveyor belt, something like this. And the machine comes down and literally goes boop and throws 80 dabs at once. It's actually kind of freaking brilliant. So when you take them out to install them separately, make sure you chisel back all the dabs because they're specific to that location. And it'll get in the way of connecting with your other tile. So that is going to be an individual job there. And I've got a bunch of these. We're just going to continue with our dry fit until we're happy, because we don't want to be mixing anything until we're happy. There we go. So we're going to start as close to this tray as we can here. We've got all these offcuts that we can set up along the side. That's going to work really well. Well, there we go. The mosaic tile dry fit is now complete. Got it all cleaned up. But before we go and install it, I want to ask you a quick question. Do you like the decision I made about how to cut around that grate? Let me know in the comment section if you had any better ideas. All right, guys, now I am using my Schluter Ditra trowel for laying mosaic tile. It is my weapon of choice for dealing with mosaic. I like the skinny grout, the skinny track lines. When you have a surface like this, it comes so perfect. No need to try to overthink the installation. By having something this flat and custom made in a factory versus making something yourself on site, you already are pretty much eliminated the majority of the problems you would run into traditionally, right? No high-low spots, which means you don't need a lot of thin set to set those sheets of tile. In this situation, less is more, right? The biggest enemy you have here is the squeeze out, and that is when you press a tile into the cement, does material come squeezing up between those grout lines. You know, just a little bit of thin set, this tile isn't going to go anywhere. The secret to doing this, guys, is A, not being in a rush. We're not trying to press anything in place. We're just trying to lay it in place. The less pressure we use at this point, the better off we are. Trying to avoid that squeeze out. And it will happen if we use too much pressure. Trying to make sure that every one of these grout lines are very consistent. If it's not consistent on the sheet, the way it's glued down, cut them apart, clean up the glue, and set them individually. Okay, and here's the secret. Now this is how we apply the pressure, because they're all little pieces. Okay, we're not doing anything too crazy. Just put a little bit of weight, 40, 50 pounds, set it in that thin set. And once again, we're using the Schluter all set. You don't have to be concerned about what type of thin set you use if you use it. Make sure that the surface, everywhere where you're going to step, is completely flat. No lippage. Plus, it's got that retro kind of look to it. So I think it's kind of fun. And then up the middle. There. Set it and forget it. How sexy is that? So making sure that all your grout lines are consistent is the key to a good installation. If it comes from the factory and they're out of position and the grout lines aren't consistent, cut away the glue dots, clean them up, and set them one at a time if you have to. But nothing says rookie like a sheet that's squeezed in instead of taking the time to cut 1/8 of an inch off. Always, always dry fit and make it perfect every time. Okay, guys. So before we get going any further with the tile, let's address this. Remember, if you've been watching the series, you know that we set this pan, it's preformed, comes in one piece, it's lightweight but incredibly durable, into thin set. And then we use that to level it off. So I do have gaps here. So even though we poured floor leveler, because I had to use something to keep the floor leveler from going through these holes, I've got these gaps. So I'm going to address that with the rest of my Curdy fix. Okay, and what I'm looking for doing here is really to just waterproof the rest of this floor, seal up any opportunity for water to escape if it gets underneath my shower pan. I'm also going to waterproof the tile with silicone. Standard practice whenever you're changing planes. But I'm just going to add this little extra bit of insurance. I mean, I've got the tube sitting here. The stuff is expensive. Might as well put it to work. Get a bead of sealant all the way across here. And then also up underneath here. Why the heck not? And now all we have to do is start getting some measurements. Here's my grout line. Pretty consistent. This shower pan slopes down like one piece. It's very flat plane. And then it hits this location right here in the middle of the drain and then starts going back up again. All right, it's really, really some minutia issue, but I'm going to take 3 measurements so that I can trace this out. Remember, we're going to try to get as close to this as possible. If you want to be exact, you got to get as low as the tile. That's 4 3/4. All right, 4 7/8, and this one is definitely 4 7/8. So we're going to start with these tiles on the back wall, get all these measurements, run it out to the wet saw, and then once we've got all of our dry fit done for the rest of the base, we're going to be good to go. Now, one quick note, this is a 30-inch pan. This sill is 4.5 inches, plus the backside build out. It's actually, almost perfect. So this tile is 23 3/4. Now watch this. It's 24 inches and a hair to the corner of this. So my grout line is actually one piece of stone to here and then one L, okay? It's kind of intentional. I saw that coming in, same as the other side, okay? So my three sides are gonna be really quick to cut. And then I've got to rip down the slope for this side and the same tile for this side. One thing to consider here is that visually, we're going to work on lining up that grout line right through the floor, through to the door. So it's all very, very symmetrical, okay? So here's my scratch line on the tile cutter. I've got a ridge here, and I got an arrow right here. You see that? So that's my arrow. In the middle of this notch, that's where I want my spot to be. So once I line that up, I make sure I'm making contact on both sides so I'm square. Perfect every time. Bloody hell. So it chipped off a little bit on me. It's not going to be a problem. This is a small chip. And wherever there's a change of plane, so if this was the shower floor, we're going to have it off the ground just a hair, right? And then we're going to use a bead of silicone to close it all up. So that's still going to work out fine. I'm not cutting that twice. This one's going to be tricky because I want to save this one until we actually have the floor installed so that this tile is on top of the floor. What I'm going to do, I'm going to get the inside corner notch on it and we'll cut the height later. I'm going to cut it where I have a grout line. Here's my outside corner. I'll cut that on the wet saw and then I'll just have this standing by so when I go to do the floor, I can just measure, quick scratch cut, and it's done. I'm going to go grab my square, draw these two lines, cut these out, and then we'll just save these until we're putting the floor on in a few minutes from now. I'm going to go cut these 3 stones. The top of this, I'm going to actually use a solid piece of, it's a faux stone. You can get them at the Home Depot as well. It's like a marble sill, solid white. It's probably a quartz product. So I'm going to be able to set that on top. We'll worry about cutting these after we get the first row of floor tile on. That's going to be when we want to put the caps on and then cut these stones as well. All right. In this particular case, I've made this thin set a little on the thin side. So it's got some squeezability. Instead of using all of these leveling clips, we're just going to use the wedges at the bottom and get our grout lines consistent. Okay. Whew. Now we have to move it out of the way and put the Schluter down in preparation for the floor tile.